Good morning, everyone. My name is John Heibush, and I have the honor of being the Executive Director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. In honor of our men and women who defend our freedom around the world, if you would please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. Please be seated. Before we get started, there are a few people in the audience I'd like to make sure we recognize this morning, and I absolutely have to start with the lovely young lady I met this morning, who is Governor Pence's daughter, Charlotte. Charlotte, if you please stand. From the Reagan Foundation and Institute's Board of Trustees, we have Governor Pete Wilson and his lovely wife, Gail. Pete and Gail. And our former advance man for President Reagan, Andrew Littlefair, with his wife, Karen. Andrew. We will not forget our former congressman and his wife, Elton and Janice Gallagher. Great to have you here. I want to introduce Ventura County District Attorney Greg Totten, but I don't think he could stay. But he brought along with him, I think, Ventura County Supervisor Peter Foy. There's Peter. And from the city of Simi Valley, Bob Huber, Keith Mashburn, Mike Judge, Eric Levitt, and from the city of Thousand Oaks, Rob McCoy, all over here. Last but not least, Director of the Reagan Library, Duke Blackburn. Duke, I know you're there. Okay, well, I am truly honored to welcome all of you to our mountaintop. It's not a geological surprise for our second-time visitor and special guest today, but it's good practice. You see, a textbook of his state's topography in 1988 reported that, quote, "There are no mountains in Indiana, and there is no hint there ever were." But I realize our special guest might feel as if he's done quite a bit of climbing these past few weeks, with a few peaks ahead as he works his way and fights his way toward the second highest office in our land. And I think I can say for all of us gathered here today, Governor, that we are glad to join you in that climb. If I might, some sage advice from President Reagan, who often paraphrased Psalms when he said, quote, "I look to the hills, from whence cometh my strength." Well, all climbing aside, I can say I am sure President Reagan would have felt an immediate kinship with our guest. After all, knowing that he grew up just one state west of the Wabash River. He was proudly acquainted with Hoosier hysteria and commented that in Indiana, quote, "Babies are not born with silver spoons in their mouths. They come equipped with basketballs and high-top sneakers." Well, while Indiana may be considered the capital of American basketball, it doesn't take long to realize that it's also the breeding ground for fine character. In the words of Hoosier poet James Whitcomb Riley, there are, quote, "the good old-fashioned people, the hale, hard-working people." And to that end, in 1947, the General Assembly of Indiana adopted a resolution, you gotta love this, quote, "serving notice on Congress of the United States that the people of Indiana are fed up with subsidies, doles, and paternalism benevolently described as federal grants and aid." Well, that kind of thinking fits right into our 40th president's wheelhouse, and it's that kind of thinking that has brought our guest to the forefront of American politics. But like Ronald Reagan, I was interested to learn Governor Pence, too, is a recovering Democrat who crossed to the right side of the road after voting for Jimmy Carter in 1980. Perhaps you heard him on the radio in the early 80s on the Mike Pence show, WRCR-FM in Rushville, Indiana, where he called himself, quote, Rush Limbaugh on decaf. And where he began his political journey to Congress and then as 50th governor of Indiana. Today, his journey continues in a new partnership and in a new role. We recognize that those partnerships, Governor, can even involve the give and take and differences among running mates. President Reagan's successful economic program for the nation became known as Reaganomics. But before becoming the president's vice presidential pick, George H.W. Bush came up with another name for President Reagan's plan. You might recall during the campaign he coined it voodoo economics. Yet, he ended up becoming the most reliable wingman President Reagan ever had. What we also recognize are the similarities our guest shares with President Reagan: a belief in God, American exceptionalism, and the power of individual liberty, the importance of fiscal responsibility, the astounding capacity of American business, the need for a strong military to provide a safer world, and above all, a desire to be home with his wife for dinner every night. To ensure that you'll make it home tonight, Governor, I shall be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce to you Governor Mike Pence.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you for that overly generous introduction. I'm very humbled by that, and frankly quite moved that so many of you would come out to welcome me and my favorite oldest daughter to this great and important place, to Governor Wilson and Gail, to John Hybush with the foundation, to the trustees who are gathered here, to my former colleague, Congressman Gallegly. It is a joy, it is a privilege to be in Reagan country. It really is. I'm grateful that so many of you would come out, particularly some of the young people who are here from local schools. And I've just in the last few months gotten used to bigger crowds. Comes with the opportunity that I was afforded a little more than 6 weeks ago to run and serve as the next Vice President of the United States of America. Well, John, things have changed for me a little bit. It wasn't too long ago. I was running up to an event in Rushville, Indiana, and the fellow who'd organized it had it in the local school auditorium, and I was a little bit late, as I was a little today. And I was racing past him, and there were just 3 people on the front row. And I said to him, did you see there's just 3 people in there for my speech? And he said, yes, sir, I saw that. And I said, well, didn't you tell him I was the speaker? And he said, no, sir, but I'm going to find out who did. So thanks for coming. This is very, very, very humbling to me today. It really is. I want to speak today about 2 men. One who has inspired my life in so many ways that it makes this very moment very humbling to me and more than a little bit emotional. And one who has become my friend and is inspiring a movement across this country that will make America great again. But before I do that, let me just express a word of appreciation to all of you who have supported this extraordinary place, all that you do to support the Reagan Library, the memory of this good man and this extraordinary couple and this family. I just said to a few members of the board upstairs that for me this is my second visit here. It was about 10 years ago that I brought Charlotte and Audrey and Michael and their mother here. And would you join me in thanking all of the patrons who are here today for keeping the life, the work, the mission, and the legacy of Ronald Wilson Reagan alive for future generations. Thank you so much. The hospitality here has been overwhelming, and I really do want to begin. I like to open the old book every morning, and one of my favorite verses is that if you owe debts, pay debts. If honor, then honor. If respect, then respect. And more than anything else, I'm here today, first, to pay a debt of honor and a debt of gratitude to someone whose example, whose eloquence, whose broad-shouldered leadership in so many ways has inspired my small life and will continue to inspire whatever contributions I'm able to make to the life of this nation. We came here because I wanted my children to get a better look at this man who is now a part of history. But I probably only told them about 1,000 times that I actually met Ronald Reagan. Okay, 1,001. The opportunity I had in 1988, I was a 29-year-old candidate for Congress. We got invited out to the White House. Governor, it was probably just a photo op, supposed to be. But I was standing there with my new bride, Karen, my wife now of 31 years, and we were waiting to go into the Blue Room where President Reagan was waiting in one of those gold and blue chairs. And, the political people had told me I should talk about something in Indiana, that we needed a bridge or we needed a road. But I just looked at Karen and I said, this man's the reason I became a Republican. And I said, I'd just like to say something to him that I could tell my grandkids. And Karen just looked at me like she still does and just said, speak from your heart. So I walked in and I shook his hand. For all the world, I felt like I was talking to Mount Rushmore. But he set me at ease, I guess like he always did. And he sat down and he said, Mike, so how's the campaign going? And I said, well, Mr. President, I have something I'd really like to just tell you. And he said, well, go ahead. And I said, I just want to thank you. I said, I want to thank you for everything you've done to inspire my generation to believe in this country again. And for all of my life, for the rest of my life, I'll always believe that in that moment, the 40th President of the United States of America blushed. And he said, well, Mike, that's a very nice thing of you to say. It was an incredible moment for me because in that moment I saw real humility. And before I leave you today, I'll share what the rest of the conversation taught me. I think in this moment of what Margaret Thatcher said in that message at the National Cathedral where I and Elton had the privilege to sit and to pray on that sad day. Margaret Thatcher said, quote, we here still move in twilight, but we have one beacon to guide us that Ronald Reagan never had. We have his example. Ronald Reagan's example informed my entire political life, and it informs it still. His ideals inspired me to leave the party of my youth and become a Republican like he did. I don't know really what it was that made the connection with Reagan. I was a young Democrat. I was the Youth Democrat Party coordinator in my hometown in 1975. Kind of a community organizer, if the truth be told. But there was something about the man. You know, my grandfather immigrated from Ireland. I was named after him. And I don't know if it was the fact that he was an unambiguous Irishman, his Midwestern roots, but he inspired me. I started my career like he did in radio. I worked in radio in the state of Indiana. And I would go on to serve in the Congress with the likes of Elton Gallagher. I often tell people if I only had 12 years left to live, I'd want to live it as a member of Congress, because that was the longest 12 years of my life. The truth is, it was a great privilege to represent Indiana and to fight for the very things. I felt like I was kind of a late arrival to the Reagan Revolution on Capitol Hill. I'd run in 1988, but I wasn't elected to Congress for another 12 years. But when I got there, I met up with other Reaganites like Elton Gallagher, and we worked shoulder to shoulder for all the principles of the Reagan Revolution: a strong military, less government, less taxes, less regulation, and traditional moral values. And it was my great honor to advocate those things. But I'll also tell you, as governor of Indiana, he inspired me. When I became governor of the great state of Indiana, I made a deeper study of California's history. And you could thank this great governor in the great tradition of great California Republican governors. Governor Wilson, I really am honored to have you here. Thank you so very much. But I looked at Ronald Reagan's season as governor, and I saw his commitment to pro-growth policies, to lower taxes, to education reform, and I saw him as a solutions conservative. And he inspired me in the state of Indiana still. My predecessor in the state of Indiana actually worked for President Reagan, helped lay a foundation of fiscal responsibility in the state of Indiana, and after I became governor, we were able to roll our sleeves up, passed the largest state tax cut in Indiana history, the largest increase in education funding, more than $2 billion in funding for roads and bridges. We now have one of 12 states with a AAA bond rating, and more Hoosiers are working than ever before in the state of Indiana. Those Reagan principles still work when you put them into practice. And I can promise you, it's exactly the kind of leadership that Donald Trump is going to bring to Washington, D.C. when he's elected President of the United States. Okay? But it is really remarkable to think of the times in which we live today. It's remarkable to think 36 years ago, Ronald Reagan crisscrossing the country as my family and I, and Donald Trump and his family have the privilege of doing, building a movement that historians later hailed as that Reagan Revolution. Today we look back and it all seems so obvious, doesn't it? So clear-cut that the Republican Party and millions of Democrats would make the decision to unite behind a leader we now regard as one of our nation's greatest presidents. But at the time, as most of you in the room know, it was a little bit different. Back in 1980, that was hardly the prevailing view. Not by a long shot. The smart set in Washington, D.C. mocked and dismissed that California governor in many ways. He was referred to as a simpleton by some. They said he was little more than a celebrity and an entertainer who entered politics late in life. Sound familiar? Truth be told, initially, Reagan even made some inside the Republican Party uneasy. His rhetoric sounded too strident, too unrefined, and they warned of it. Then the hinge of history began to swing in freedom's direction. Soon something amazing began to happen. Unexpected. People, millions of them, started flocking to his campaign. Working-class Democrat families like the one my mom grew up in suburban Chicago. Union members, folks who'd frankly never voted in a presidential election, all began to lean in and listen to the voice and the eloquence and the common sense of this uncommonly talented man. In his voice, they heard the rare and unmistakable sound of a man unbound by Washington niceties and pretense of power. In his voice, they heard for the first time in a long time the truth. Ronald Reagan spoke the truth to the American people, just like Donald Trump has. Now that's no small thing. I think honesty is the axis on which leadership spins. When you respect somebody, you tell them the truth, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Ronald Reagan's beliefs were straightforward. They were unchanging, and they were American as the wide plains of the Midwest, where he and I both grew up. Placed his faith in a loving God, the goodness of this country, and the collective wisdom of the American people. In so doing, he set out to change a nation, and Ronald Reagan changed the world. It's extraordinary to think. It truly is. So how did he do it? Well, like my running mate, I'd say first and foremost, Ronald Reagan knew his own mind. And he had the courage and the convictions to know what he was for and know what he was prepared to fight against. Michael Reagan tells an especially revealing story. It's now one of my favorites. When his dad lost the Republican nomination to Gerald Ford in 1976, as the story goes, Michael asked his dad what was going through his mind, what disappointed him the most, and Ronald Reagan replied was that he was disappointed that now he would be unable to face the leader of the Soviet Union at the negotiating table. Here's the quote. "My dad said to me, 'Michael, I want to sit down with President Brezhnev. I was going to allow him to choose the place, even allow him to choose the room, choose the table, choose the chairs. I wanted to sit there and listen to him tell me everything the United States was going to have to get up just to get along with the Soviets. Then I was going to get up very slowly while he was talking, and I was going to walk around to the other side of the table and lean over and whisper in his ear, 'Niet.' Isn't that great? Man knew his own mind, and he had the courage of his convictions. Today we're no longer called upon to say no or niet to a Soviet Union, but I believe we as Americans are called upon to start saying no again all the same. I think it's a time when we should say no to weakened American leadership on the world stage that apologizes to our enemies and abandons our friends. We should say no more to the deep cuts in the arsenal of democracy and no more ransom payments to state sponsors of terror. And we should say no to a sputtering economy that's pushed millions of Americans out of the labor force, made those who are fortunate enough to have jobs to make do with less and less, and we should say no to anyone who says that the American dream is dead for the future of this country. So it's a different time and different men. But I want to tell you that Donald Trump's heart, and at the very heart of Donald Trump's campaign for president, is the same impatience, the same dissatisfaction with the status quo. And in Donald Trump's heart and on this team and in this campaign is the belief in the greatness of this country and the same confidence in the boundless potential of the American people to set things right. Ronald Reagan was an actor from a small town in the Midwest, and Donald Trump is a builder from the Empire State. They are different men with different styles. a long way from Dixon, Illinois to Manhattan Island. I should know. But I will tell you, knowing my running mate, having come to know him on a personal level, I truly do believe, and I'm here to say, that there are fundamental similarities between these two men that bear reflection for all of us who want to meet this moment in the history of our nation with the same broad-shouldered leadership and common-sense conservative principles that Ronald Reagan advanced. Their honesty and toughness, and a belief in the time-honored principles that have always made America great and strong. You know, Americans know deep down in their hearts during every election, politicians pile up mountains of policies and plans, but those promises oftentimes mean nothing when they come from a dishonest candidate. The reason Reagan's bluntness ushered in a Republican landslide, I believe, is fairly simple. He meant it, and so does Donald Trump. Honesty transcends party. That's why, for the same reason, so many Democrats, or what somebody once called Trumpocrats recently, have now emerged in the wake of what we used to call Reagan Democrats in this country. They're rallying to the same clarion voice and the same truth in that voice. Like Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump has the honesty and bluntness to confront the challenges facing the American people from his first day in office. And also, like Reagan, Trump, I believe, I don't have to tell anybody in this room, just like Reagan, who was willing to walk out of Reykjavik, was anxious to lean over and say "Niet," Donald Trump has the toughness to rebuild our economy and command the respect of the world. Truth and toughness are but the common denominators between these two uncommonly strong leaders. And I think those are qualities that explain why so many blue-collar Democrats and independents across the country, as well as millions of Republicans, are joining this movement. It's one of the things Donald Trump tells me most often, like when we were at the Canfield, Ohio Fair just the other day. We were on our way to the fairgrounds, and it was Labor Day, and we thought stopping by a fairgrounds would be a good thing. Now, I told Donald in the car that now you're in my strike zone, right? I mean, I know county fairs. All right? Livestock barn, get a corn dog, a lemon shake-up, and you're there. So I was briefing him on that on the way to the fairgrounds. The only thing is, when you go to the fair with Donald Trump, it's a little bit different. We arrived, and you can go look at the pictures, I won't exaggerate. We arrived on the fairgrounds, and the streets into the fairgrounds were lined 10 deep, 20 deep, 30 deep. There was no event there. People just heard that this good man, our nominee for president, would be there at the Canfield Fair. And before we would leave and we would stand on the railing of our car, both of us waving to the crowd that was as far as the eye could see, we were told that there were 50,000 people that came out to that county fairgrounds because they believe we can make America great again. They know a better deal's coming. And they also know that they're part of a movement. Donald says that to me more often than anything else. When we see those crowds, he'll look to me in those private moments in the car or in a phone conversation, and he'll say to us, this is a movement, Mike. It's bigger than us. And he says it with the kind of humility that we so admire in leaders, and I admire in my running mate. America's choice has never been clearer, I believe. The most straight-talking candidate since Ronald Reagan is running against one of the most dishonest candidates ever. Well, let me say, as I stand in this hallowed place, The American people picked a bold truth teller in 1980, and I know they're going to elect a bold truth teller in 2016. Now, these challenging times, let me reflect on the policies and then I'll close. These challenging times bear a striking similarity, I believe, to the time America faced in 1980. Then, as now, we stand at a fault line of history. An economy in decline, joblessness stretched as far as the eye can see, alarming social upheaval, and an America pushed around abroad and full of self-doubt at home. We need smart and decisive leadership to fix America's problems while there's still time. Because truth be told that in many respects, elites in both political parties, then as now, have failed to give us government as good as our people, but that's about to change again. So how will it change? Well, everything begins with security. Americans of every background recognize the common dangers that we all face. This week, it will be 15 years since 9/11. It's hard to believe. The threats and dangers have not receded. In fact, as you learned in shocking and heartbreaking tragedy here in California, they are closer and more serious than ever before. During a Trump presidency, I can assure you, we will restore the arsenal of democracy. We will restore the alliances that keep us strong and secure. And we will have a commander-in-chief, as you heard last night and heard yesterday, who will take those resources and those new alliances, and we will hunt down and destroy those who threaten our people and inspire those who would bring us harm. Donald Trump, like Ronald Reagan, will rebuild America's military. It's extraordinary to think that since 1991, our active duty armed forces have diminished from 2 million to just 1.3 million today. Our Navy has shrunk from a fleet of over 500 ships down to 272. The Air Force is roughly 1/3 smaller. The armed forces deserve better. Like Reagan, Donald Trump knows that we can only have peace if America is strong. And on day one of a Trump administration, Donald Trump, as he announced yesterday, will submit a new budget to rebuild our military, an active army of 540,000 soldiers, as the Army Chief of Staff says he needs. He will build a Marine Corps based on 36 battalions, a Navy of 350 surface ships. Our Air Force will have at least 1,200 fighter aircraft. We will modernize our naval cruisers, enforce our classification rules, command relevant departments to conduct a thorough review of cyber defenses, and America will once again be known as the arsenal of democracy. As the proud father of a United States Marine, let me promise you this. Our new Commander-in-Chief will support our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines with the resources and the training they need to get the job done safe and come home to us. That's probably why so many military families are supporting this campaign. It's probably why so many veterans make their way to Trump-Pence rallies around the United States. In fact, could I just ask any men and women who've worn the uniform of the United States of America, could you stand, or if you're able, or raise your hand and just allow us to show one more installment of appreciation? Thank you for your service. A strong military and a strong America, Ronald Reagan knew, makes for a strong America in the world, an America that the world takes seriously. Donald Trump and I know what Ronald Reagan knew, and that is America needs to be strong for the world to be safe. Foreign policy record of this administration has weakened America's place in the world. It's extraordinary to think of the policies of this administration and of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. To take a picture of the Middle East from the day they took office and look at a map of the Middle East today, it almost doesn't look like the same place. Civil war in Syria, the rise and rule of the ISIS caliphate, a civil war in Libya, and terrorist forces that have overrun the hard-fought gains that were secured in the last Republican administration by our soldiers when this administration took office. Iraq, Libya, the wider Middle East, the rise of greater and more emboldened Russia, a more emboldened China, its activities in the South China Sea, Russia's interventions in Ukraine. It all has a vague familiarity to it from those days in the 1970s. Then, as now, there were examples of monumental bad judgment. And also, there were examples that demonstrated that truth of history that Reagan knew, that Donald Trump knows, that weakness arouses evil. And weak foreign policy by the United States of America emboldens our enemies, abandons our friends, and those days are over, starting November the 8th. But similar to those times as well is the times that we live in our economy. The last 7.5 years, we've seen an administration whose policies have stifled the American economy. It's extraordinary to think of it. We are in the midst of the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. We have, a few days now after Labor Day, we have the lowest labor participation rate in this country since the 1970s. Don't be deceived by the low unemployment rate. The truth is that there are millions and millions of men and women in this country who aren't counted in that number because they simply aren't looking for work anymore. And probably most heartbreaking of all, there are nearly 7 million more Americans living in poverty today than the day that Barack Obama became president of the United States. Well, their nominee, her plan, is more of the same. More taxes, more regulation, more Obamacare, and more of the war on American energy that has run our nation's economy into a ditch. Well, let me promise you, just as in those days that we celebrate and remember on these walls, we're about to elect a president who knows that the strength of the American economy is in the ingenuity and the freedom of the American people. And Donald Trump will empower the American people to revive this economy again. Donald Trump at the Detroit Economic Club, a place that Ronald Reagan used to like to speak, laid out a plan to revive our economy on those time-honored practices and principles. I always like to say conservative ideas work every time you try them. They work back in the Hoosier State, where we have more Hoosiers working than ever before, and they'll work again in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump's plan is going to sound familiar to some of you here in Reagan country. We're going to lower marginal rates on every American. We're going to end death taxes once and for all. We're going to lower the corporate tax rate so American businesses can compete with businesses around the world and keep jobs here. Reagan also knew what Donald Trump knows, and that is regulation is a form of taxation. So on day one, Donald Trump will do what we did in the Hoosier State. He's going to sign a moratorium on any new federal regulation, and he's going to repeal every single one of Barack Obama's job-killing executive orders. When Donald Trump becomes negotiator-in-chief, we're also going to have trade deals that work for American workers. We're going to make sure. Donald Trump and I both believe in free trade. But we believe in arm's length transactions. We believe trade needs to be a win-win. We're going to renegotiate NAFTA to ensure that it works for the people of the United States. We're going to get out of these multinational deals like the TPP. And at the end of the day, we're going to hold our trading partners at last to the promises that they make when they sign a deal with the people of the United States of America. And lastly, the fact that we're running against someone who actually boasted. And I quote, if she was elected president, quote, "We will put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business," close quote. On day one of the Trump-Pence administration, we will end the war on coal once and for all, and we will unleash the boundless power of the natural resources of the United States of America. Let me speak to one other matter and then close and get to your questions. And that is on, we'll elect literally, as the calendar speaks today, on September the 8th, 2 months, November the 8th, we'll elect a president for the next 4 years. But it's so important for those of us that cherish the ideals and the legacies of Ronald Reagan to remember that while we're electing a president for the next 4 years, that president will likely set the course and direction of the Supreme Court of the United States for the next 40 years. And we need to think long and hard about that. Donald Trump, for his part, has made it clear. When he becomes president of the United States of America, from the Supreme Court on down, we will appoint to the federal judiciary men and women who will strictly construe the Constitution of the United States and not legislate from the bench. Ronald Reagan said it so well. And I quote, "The importance of judicial restraint, the belief of our founding fathers that the role of the judge is to interpret the law, not preempt the rights of the people and their legislatures by making the law." Judicial restraint, the role of the judge. You know, I've said throughout this speech that Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump had similar views on some key issues, similar ideals and similar backbone. But let me be very clear with you. After my 10 years on the Judiciary Committee on Capitol Hill, working in and around these issues for a lifetime, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump's views on the Supreme Court are not similar, they are identical. And he will appoint justices that will make the Reagan tradition proud on our Supreme Court. And finally, one last point. You know, for too many in Washington, in the view of too many Americans, politics seems to have morphed into a rigged game of self-enrichment and cronyism. One great Democrat that I'm pretty sure Ronald Reagan admired, Harry Truman, put it this way, quote, "No young man should go into politics if he wants to get rich." Truman said, quote, "An honest public servant can't become rich in politics," close quote. Well, the Pences passed that test. Yet what do we see today? We see politicians enter office with modest means and they emerge as millionaires. Auctioning access, profiting off policies is anathema to the very spirit of public service. You know, in places like Allentown, Pennsylvania, Youngstown, Ohio, Fort Wayne, Indiana, people don't know how to work the system, they just know how to work. All they ask for is that chance. And in a Trump-Pence administration, we're going to make sure they have it. Americans are fed up with Washington's self-enrichment racket. I think that's why independents, Republicans, and many Democrats are reeling from the headlines that we see one day after another. Reagan knew what Donald Trump knows. We must have the highest standards of integrity in the highest office in the land, and we will when Donald Trump becomes President of the United States. So, 1980, 2016. Two different men, two different times, but so much seems familiar, does it not? The challenges that we face, the opportunity that we have. I cracked open that old book this morning, and I happened to land in Ecclesiastes that said millennia ago that there's nothing new under the sun. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. Boy, I sure hope so. But I'm here to tell you, and I'm very humbled to be in this place with you all. Charlotte and I had the great privilege of laying a wreath at the final resting place of this wonderful couple that changed our country and changed the world. It was an emotional moment for me. But I want to give you a word of encouragement as well. That something big is stirring in our country. And it's coming from the American people. I mean, the spirit of 1980 that propelled Ronald Reagan into the White House is alive and kicking again. I see it every day. I just joined this ticket a little more than 6 weeks ago, but I can tell you, campaigning with Donald Trump and for Donald Trump, I see in the faces of Americans in big cities and small towns an optimism, a determination that I think is going to turn this country around. I see it in the faces of the thousands that we meet on the campaign trail. People failed by an out-of-touch Washington elite. And I had a woman walk up to me just the other day, and she just said to me, "Thank you for running with Donald Trump. I can't wait to vote." It's 61 days from an opportunity we have to restore confidence to our people, to have America standing tall again, at home and abroad, to have an economy that's working for all of our people on a foundation of our Constitution and the high standards in public life that we all expect in this nation. But I have faith. I think we're going to do it. And it's not because of the polls. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the polls. I learned a long time ago, you get into a rough campaign, you got to turn on the television with a stick every morning. With what's going to be there. But it's something else. And it was manifested in two conversations I'll close with. One with my running mate and one with the man whose name is on this building. The rest of that conversation with Ronald Reagan in 1988 happened in the East Room. I did the little photo op thing with him for that 5 minutes and got up, started breathing again. Then I walked into the East Room. My wife was waiting there with some other couples, or maybe 30 of us in the room. We were just to hold there and wait till the president departed. But he all of a sudden burst into the room. You might remember those days. He actually, I think, said, "I heard there was some ladies in here and I wanted to meet you all." Well, there was a great moment where my wife got to ask him a question. He got a few questions. He took a few questions from that little podium in the East Room. And Several people asked about policies and important things. My wife raised her hand and said, "Where's Nancy?" And he really melted. Made a point to reach way over and shake her hand before he left the room. But he said something that day that I'll just never forget. So I guess a couple other people must have said to him what I'd said when I told him that I wanted to thank him for what he'd done for the country. Because before he left, he said, several of you made a point to thank me for what I'd done for this country for the last 8 years. It was August 1988. America had come roaring back. The Soviet Union was back on its heels. We were standing tall again at home and abroad. He said, several of you have thanked me for what I did for this country. And then he said, I want you to know I don't think I did anything for this country. He said, I think the American people decided to right the ship. And I was just the captain they put on the bridge when they did it. We were riding over to the convention. I think it was the night of his speech. And Donald Trump, ever the coach, ever the CEO, was sitting next to me. And he was saying to me, Mike, he said, we got a great opportunity here. We got a great opportunity for this country. And he said to me, well, we're going to have to work. I felt like I was in a locker room. He said, we're going to have to go after it. We're going to have to roll our sleeves up. We're going to have to just make it happen. We're going to work on it. He goes, but we get to election day, and he said, we get this thing done with the American people. It's going to be great. And there was this confidence, this lilt in his voice, and I hadn't heard that since 1988 in the East Room. In both of these men, I just want to tell you, there's so much that's different in terms of their style and their background. But at the very core, both Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump are united in a boundless faith in the American people. And that's why I know in this moment that if all of us will do all that we can to elect this good man as the 45th President of the United States of America, if we put that new captain on the bridge, I know we will make America great again. Thank you very much. And God bless you. Thank you for the honor of being here today.
Yeah, we got the best chat, the best tunes, the best troll-slaying mods. Like and subscribe for updates and alerts whenever the gentleman's on.
Cleveland, terrific place. We've had a terrific relationship with Ohio and with Cleveland, so thank you all very much. School choice, we're going to be talking about it, and so important. Just met some of your students, and they are terrific. They have a great future. They'll be taking my job someday, and I'll be happy about it. In particular, though, I want to thank Mr. Ron Packard. Where is Ron? Is he here someplace? Yes, he is. Thank you, Ron. Fantastic job. And Ms. Deborah Mays, who has really done an incredible job. Deborah, thank you. Thank you. What a great job. For hosting us at this beautiful school. Today we're going to discuss one of the most important issues in this campaign, school choice. But before we do, I want to briefly discuss new revelations about Hillary Clinton's very famous emails. According to the FBI report, the FBI did not find that hostile foreign actors, and would think of this, it's so important, when they went around and were so vigilant, at least as far as this, but they found that hostile foreign actors gained access to the personal email accounts of individuals with whom Clinton was in regular contact, and in doing so, obtained emails sent to or received by Clinton on her personal account. And every time she talks about the subject, it's different. She's got to get her act together. Remember, Hillary Clinton was emailing about the drone program, among many other extremely sensitive matters. This is yet more evidence that Clinton is unfit to be your commander-in-chief. By the way, the whole country saw how unfit she was at the town hall last night, where she refused to take accountability for her failed policies in the Middle East that have produced millions of refugees, unleashed horror of radical Islamic terrorism all over, and made us less safe than ever before. Throughout it all, she put the country, and I mean the entire country, at risk in order to cover up her pay-for-play scandals as Secretary of State. These include scandals giving up uranium to Russia, doing favors for UBS Bank, and selling contracts to friends and family in Haiti. It's all about hiding criminal enterprise, and that's what it's about. As part of her criminal cover-up, Hillary's, and you know her staff, you know it well, you read about it all the time, you just read about it, and it's getting worse and worse. Hillary Clinton's staff deleted and digitally bleached, which is acid cleaned, her emails after receiving a congressional subpoena. That's after receiving, not before. That's after receiving. She gets a subpoena from the United States Congress, and she deletes and bleaches. She also, and her staff, destroyed some of her 13 different phones, but this time with a hammer. I've never done that. Then, when she was interviewed by the FBI, she claimed she couldn't remember important events 39 times. She couldn't even remember whether she was trained or handling classified information. Didn't remember anything about it. So if she really didn't remember, that's a problem. And if she did remember, that's a problem. She even said she didn't know what the letter C stood for, whether it was confidential, classified information, or something. All the while, as Hillary and Bill raked in millions of dollars from special interest, the world was falling apart. Hillary Clinton's policies produced ruin in Libya, Iraq, and Syria. Absolute ruin and death. She failed in Russia. She failed in China. She failed miserably in North Korea. Her policies unleashed ISIS, spread terrorism, and put Iran on a path to nuclear weapons, not to mention the ransom payments. Oh, those ransom payments. Remember 2 weeks ago, it was $400 million in cash. Well, yesterday we found out that in cash, it was $1.7 billion. These are unheard of. This is cash. This isn't wire transfer. This isn't check. This is cash, $1.7 billion. And then you say, is that going to terror or is that going to people's bank accounts? I actually think it's going to both. On top of it all, Hillary Clinton is trigger happy, totally trigger happy. She's raced to invade, intervene, and topple regimes. She believes in globalism, not Americanism. Everybody understands it. Last night, she even falsely said, no American died in Libya. Now, I heard that, and I said, could she have forgotten so quickly? Then she also falsely said there's no ground troops in Iraq, even though we have 5,000 military personnel there right now. Iraq is one of the biggest differences in this race. I opposed going in, and I did oppose it, despite the media saying no, yes, no. I opposed going in, and I opposed the reckless way Hillary Clinton took us out, along with President Obama, letting ISIS fill that big, terrible void. But I was opposed to the war from the beginning, long after my interview with Howard Stern. But 3 months before the Iraq war started, I said in an interview with Neil Cavuto that perhaps we shouldn't be doing it yet. and that the economy, these are quotes, that the economy, this was on live television, the economy is a much bigger problem as far as the president is concerned. This was before the war started by a very short distance. Then on March 25th of 2003, just after the war had started, just days after, just a little while after, I was quoted as saying, the war is a mess, and yet more evidence that I had opposed the war from the start. I said the war is a mess on television somewhere. In July of 2003, I said I would love to see New York City and some of our cities and some of the states of our nation get some of the money that's going toward Iraq and other places. Because you know, they really need it, and they need it badly. Well, I said that. We have numerous other quotes too, by the way, both before and shortly after. Then in August of 2004, very early in the conflict, extremely early in the conflict, right at the beginning, I made a detailed statement in an interview to Esquire magazine. So right at the beginning. And by the way, numerous honest reporters said, well, Trump may have said it at the beginning, and some said he did say it at the beginning because they had Cavuto's clip and other clips. But some said, well, you know, it doesn't matter because right at the beginning, he made very strong statements. This is many years ago. And here's what Esquire magazine said. This is a quote, an absolute quote. Look at the war in Iraq and the mess that we're in. This is right after the war started. I would never have handled it that way. Does anybody really believe that Iraq is going to be a wonderful democracy where people are going to run down to the voting box and gently put in their ballot, and the winner is happily going to step up and to lead the country? So innocently. I go, come on. 2 minutes after we leave, there's going to be a revolution. Pretty good. And the meanest, toughest, smartest, most vicious guy will take over. Well, that's going to be combinations of ISIS and Iran. Iran's taken over. They're taking over among the richest and largest oil reserves in the world. We let them do it. We let them do it. Should have never been in the war, but we should have never, ever gotten out of the war the way Barack Obama got us out, along with Hillary Clinton, because we opened it up for ISIS. So it continued. What was the purpose? This is me right at the beginning of the war, in an article. What was the purpose of this whole thing? What was the purpose? Hundreds and hundreds of young people are being killed. And what about the people coming back with no arms and with no legs? Not to mention the other side, all of those Iraqi kids who've been blown to pieces. And it turns out that all of the reasons for the war are just blatantly wrong. All this for nothing. All this for nothing. This was right at the beginning of the war. Then they see, you know, I see the lies last night. Donald Trump was always in favor of the war in Iraq. That's why I had to do this. Because the media is so dishonest, so terribly dishonest, and you understand it, and you understand it. The media is so terribly dishonest, so I had to do this. I ended with, I would have been tougher on terrorism. Bin Laden would have been caught a long time ago, before he was ultimately caught, prior to the downing of the World Trade Center. So this was right at the beginning, and those other statements were before the war even started. And the Howard statement was long before, and it was the first time anybody ever asked me about Iraq. And I said, I don't know. You know, it was very, but that was superseded because before the war, much closer to the war, I gave statements that we shouldn't go in. And shortly thereafter, immediately thereafter, and honestly, a lot of reporters said, hey, right at the beginning, he made this statement. And that statement was a very major story in Esquire magazine. So I just wanted to set the record straight. There is so much lying going on. And Hillary Clinton lied last night about numerous things, including her email, but she also lied about this. Had I been in Congress at the time of the invasion, I would have cast a vote in opposition. For years, I've been a critic of this kind of reckless foreign invasions and look, let's face it, interventions, that's what they are, that have been a hallmark of trigger-happy Hillary and her failed career. It's been a disaster. Here's the bottom line. I was a private citizen. I had no access to briefings or great intelligence surveys that she did. I had no access to anything as a private citizen. Frankly, nobody really cared too much about what I said. I'm doing business. I don't even know why I was asked the question. I guess because I was asked the question. That's who knows. But I didn't have access to all of the intelligence information that she did and everybody else did. But in Iraq, my judgment was right. And hers, with all of this information and all of this great intelligence information, was wrong, along with a lot of other people, in all fairness. It was a big mistake. Totally destabilized the Middle East. It was a big mistake. Death to so many people. Hillary Clinton is always complaining about what's wrong. I just watched her on the tarmac. She tried to make up for her horrible performance last night. It was a horrible performance. So she went on the tarmac and told more lies. But she's been there. Remember this. She's always talking about things that she's going to do. But she's been there for more than 30 years. And she's never done anything about it. Never done anything. And all you have to do is look at New York State. When she ran for senator, she said she will bring jobs back to New York State. It's a disaster. No jobs have come back. Jobs have left. New York State, upstate New York, and the areas that she was talking about, they are disasters. All you have to do is look at New York State. She said she was going to bring tremendous jobs back. It will be wonderful, just like she's saying now. She wouldn't know how to bring a job back. She wouldn't have a clue. So it's all talk, but nothing happens. And that's what's going to happen with our country on jobs. And nobody is going to bring jobs back like Donald Trump. I will be the greatest jobs-producing president that God ever created. And I say that with my pastors in the front row. With my pastors, believe me. So we're on track now to spend, listen to this, $6 trillion. $6 trillion. Could have rebuilt our country twice. All together on wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the Middle East. Meanwhile, massive portions of our country are in a state of total disrepair. It's time to rebuild America. And when I say that, we will also, before we get totally started, we will take out ISIS. Remember that. We have no choice. We have no choice. Too many Americans living in our inner cities have not been included in the American dream. We are a nation, and we're one nation. When any part of our country hurts, our whole country hurts. My goal as president will be to ensure that every child in this nation, African American, Hispanic American, all Americans, will be placed on the ladder to success. And I define that as great education and a great job. The ladder rests on a fundamental foundation. We need safety. There's such danger in our inner cities. There's such danger in our communities. In order to help our children succeed, our first duty is to ensure that every kid in America can grow up in a safe community. You read what's happening. You see what's happening. You can't have prosperity without security. This is the new civil rights agenda of our time. The right to a safe community, a quality education, and a wonderful job. Including for those great students that I met just a little while ago. They're going to do great. They are really doing great. You've done such a great job with the education here. Our campaign represents the long-awaited chance to break with the bitter failures of the past and to embrace a new and strong American future. There's no failed policy more in need of urgent change than our government-run education monopoly. And you know in the back, that's exactly what it is. They're protecting a lot of people that have a lot of really high-paying jobs, and they're not doing the jobs like Deborah, that I can tell you. And Deborah, they're making a lot more money than you, but we'll have to talk about that later. Right? The Democratic Party has trapped millions of African American and Hispanic youth in failing government schools that deny them the opportunity to join the ladder of American success. It's time to break up that monopoly. Have to do it. I want every single inner city child in America who is today trapped in a failing school to have the freedom, the civil right, to attend the school of their choice. Their parents will choose the finest school. They will attend that school. This includes private schools, traditional public schools, magnet schools, and charter schools, which must be included in any definition of school choice. Our government spends more than enough money to easily pay for this initiative, with billions and billions of dollars to be left over. It's simply a matter of putting students first, not the education bureaucracy, and that's what's happened.
That's right.
Let's run through the numbers. At the state and federal level, the United States spends more than $620 billion on K-12 education each year. That's an average of about $12,296 for every student enrolled in our elementary and secondary public schools. The federal government pays for about 10% of the K-12 costs. The other roughly $560 billion spent on K-12 education comes from the states themselves. We spend more per student than almost any other major country in the world, and we're doing very poorly in terms of a list. We spend more by far, and we're doing very poorly. So obviously, Common Core does not work, all right? Our largest cities spend some of the largest amounts of money on public schools. It's the biggest costs. New York City spends $20,226 per pupil. Baltimore spends $15,287 per student. Chicago spends $11,976 per student. And Los Angeles, it's $10,602. Just imagine if each student in these school systems was given a scholarship for this amount of money, allowing them and their family to choose the public or private school of their choice. Wouldn't that be great? Not only would this empower families, but it would create a massive education market that is competitive and produces better outcomes, and I mean far better outcomes. These schools would then cater to the needs of the individual student and family, not the needs, which is a
All right, guys, give me 1 second. For some reason, it looks like the feed got interrupted. It could be the Hillary minions at it again. I don't know. But I'll try to bring it up as soon as I possibly can. I apologize. 1 second. All right, guys. So for those that don't know, we pay the Associated Press to pass the feeds that you guys see on every single one of our rallies. We use both AP and Reuters. So let me show you guys real quick. So as you guys can see, it looks like the Associated Press and both Reuters have quote unquote interrupted the feed. All right, so it looks like it's back now, so give me 1 second.
About $1.9 billion is spent on 50 private school choice programs nationwide. These are opportunity scholarships, tax credits, and education savings accounts. This covers about 400,000 students in our country, which is still a small number. Altogether, school choice is serving more than 3.4 million students nationwide. Getting there, charter schools in particular have demonstrated amazing gains in the results in providing education to disadvantaged children. Charter schools in particular have demonstrated amazing gains in the results in providing education to disadvantaged children, and the success of these schools will be a top priority in a Trump administration. We have to fix education. We have to. Military, education, healthcare. But these things all go hand in hand. We have to fix them. My first budget will immediately add an additional federal investment of $20 billion toward school choice. This will be done by reprioritizing existing federal dollars. We have to reprioritize. Specifically, my plan will use $20 billion of existing federal dollars to establish a block grant for the 11 million school-age kids living in absolute poverty. We will give states the option to allow these funds to follow the student to the public or private school they attend. The parents will be so happy. Number one, we'll have safe streets. And number two, they'll walk their child to a school that they want to be at. How about that? How is that? What a difference. What a difference. Compare that to today where people say, how do you do it? How do you do it? Distribution of this grant will favor states that have private school choice and charter laws, encouraging them to participate. They're going to be encouraged to participate. This $20 billion will instantly extend choice to millions and millions more students. A state like Ohio will benefit greatly from these new funds. Ohio is a leader in school choice. Ohio has 5 private school choice programs that serve over 30,000 students and 384 charter schools, serving 123,844 students. Great job. But the $20 billion is only the beginning. As president, I will establish the national goal of providing school choice to every American child living in poverty. That means that we want every disadvantaged child to be able to choose the local public, private, or charter school, a magnet school, any of these schools that is best for them and for their family, for mom and dad. Each state will develop its own formula, but we want the dollars to follow the student. So important. The dollars will follow the student, and the student will follow the right school. They're going to follow the right school. $9 and $10 spent on K-12 education is spent at the state and local level. To achieve this long-term goal, we will have to make this a shared national mission to bring hope to every child in every city in this land, in our country, in our great country. I will use the pulpit of the presidency to campaign for this in all 50 states, and I will call upon the American people to elect officials at the city, state, and federal level who support school choice. So important. My administration will partner with the leadership of inner city, and I mean any one of them, any inner city in America, Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, Cleveland. We love Cleveland. We love Cleveland. Had a great experience in Cleveland, that's all I know. And by the way, your police department did a phenomenal job during the convention. And that's any city that is willing to run a pilot program to provide school choice to every child in that community. In Baltimore, for instance, that would mean more than $15,000 in funds available per student. Can't beat that. I'm confident that the politicians will not be able to suppress the will of the people anymore. It's too much, too strong. Eventually they break. The politicians, they always break. They certainly break on trade for our country. We don't make any good deals, right? They break on an hourly basis. If we can put a man on the moon, dig out the Panama Canal, and win 2 world wars, then I have no doubt that we as a nation can provide school choice to every disadvantaged child in America. If the states collectively contribute another $110 billion of their own education budgets towards school choice, on top of the $20 billion in federal dollars, that could provide $12,000 in school choice funds to every single K-12 student who today is living in poverty. The money will follow the student. That means the student will be able to attend the public, private, charter, or magnet school of their choice, and each state will develop its own system that works best for them. They're going to develop systems the likes of which you've never seen. And some states will do better than others. And then you're going to get those people to come to your state. And then other things will be happening. It'll be so exciting. And it's not really a question of the money, because we'll be saving money and having a far better education. As your president, I will be the nation's biggest cheerleader for school choice. I understand many stale old politicians will resist. Got a lot of pressure. They've got a lot of pressure on them. But it's time for our country to start thinking big and correct once again. We spend too much time quibbling over the smallest words when we should spend our time dreaming about the great adventures that lie ahead. I will also support merit pay for teachers, the great teachers, so that we reward our best teachers instead of the failed tenure system that rewards bad teachers and punishes the good ones, and the bad ones are making the same money and sometimes more than the good ones. Can't have that. At the same time, we have to ensure that jobs are waiting for our young kids when they graduate high school and college. My policy will add millions of new jobs to our country, especially for African American and Hispanic communities. Going to do such a great job. My plan to lift restrictions on the production of American energy will not only make home energy bills a lot cheaper, your electric bills will be a lot less, but it will add an estimated 500,000 jobs per year. By reducing radical regulations and overtaxation, we're bringing your taxes way down, we can bring thousands of new companies into our poorest communities. Crucially, my trade reforms will create a manufacturing revival in America. As you know, all of your companies, Cleveland is a great example, but your companies are being ripped out of your community, and your people are being left jobless, and your government's being left with no taxes. We have a nearly $800 billion, think of that, $800 billion annual trade deficit with the world. We trade with the world. We have a trade deficit of $800 billion. Who's negotiating these deals? Who's doing it? That's actually very good. Hillary Clinton is absolutely a good answer. Hillary Clinton and people like Hillary Clinton that haven't got a clue, and the clue they do have goes to their donors and the special interests, believe me. That's money coming straight out of the states like Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Maine and so many others. I've seen so many. It's so sad. When I campaigned during the primaries, I saw everything. And it was so sad to see communities that have just been left jobless, where the companies have moved to other countries, Mexico in particular, but other countries. By ending foreign currency manipulation, product dumping, and other predatory trading practices, we will be able to open thousands of new plants and factories across America. In driving over today, I passed so many places, factories. 20, 30 years ago, they were thriving. And they're just dead, worthless. A real estate person, you wouldn't pay anything. Worthless. We'll put them back into action again. The future is filled with limitless possibilities for our nation and exciting opportunities for our wonderful children. We all have to do, and we just have to work. We all have to work. But we all have to cut our ties with the failed politics of the past. You have to cut your ties. have to cut your ties. These are the people that put us in this situation. They're not going to take us out. They're not going to take us out. That includes in wars. And Hillary Clinton created a lot of the problems, and now she's saying how she's going to take us out. She doesn't have a clue. Not even a little clue. We've had such a failed foreign policy with the people we have now. A failed education policy, a totally failed economic policy, and underneath it all, a failed political system that rewards politicians for how many donors they have or how many journalists they know, not how many Americans they help to live better and more prosperous lives. That's how they get rewarded. They'll talk to you and talk to you. They'll come into Cleveland. She'll be saying what a wonderful job she's going to do. She'll get your vote. Then she'll say, see you in 4 years. She might even say, see you in 4 years, suckers. Because that's what it is. See you in 4 years, suckers. But the failures of the past are about to end. That ending begins on a very special date for this country, November 8th. Get out and vote. We will have one American nation. We will be one American people. We're fighting to give every child in every forgotten stretch of this country the chance to live out their dreams in safety and in peace. That means a safe neighborhood, a quality education, and a secure, high-paying, and exciting job. We only have bad jobs. We don't have good jobs anymore. Many of our good jobs have left. They're gone. This is how we will rebuild our future. This is how we will make America great again for everyone. God bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Cleveland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us and choosing us as your stream of choice. If you are new to our stream, we suggest that you join the community by hitting that subscribe button. If you do not want to subscribe, that's fine. A thumbs up is more than enough. Thank you very much to all the moderators on the chat for keeping the chat clean and enjoyable for everyone. I saw a lot of new people, and I would like to welcome you and thanking you for being here and enjoying this Donald Trump rally with us. I was earlier at the Mike Pence event. I wanted to stream the motorcade coming in, but since we were really up in the hills, there was no reception. So I basically filmed it. It only took like 2 minutes. We waited there for hours and just for two minutes of footage. But it's 2 awesome minutes of footage, so we're going to upload that. I was glad that you guys were here to experience the very touching, probably one of Mike Pence's best rallies that he had, the best speeches that he had. And I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Earlier today, we uploaded a news video about how Hillary had a earpiece inside her ear, and we believe that it was one of those wireless earphones, and she was getting fed answers to the questions that were being asked last night at the Commander-in-Chief Forum. So make sure you guys go to our main channel and check that out. It's very interesting, and we will continue bringing you more breaking news stories as they come. I'm sorry if I'm kind of like mumbling, but I'm really out of it. I have no sleep on me, so I'm gonna go take a nap soon. But yeah, guys, I hope to see you guys here next time, which is tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow we have another Donald Trump rally. If you need that information, is up on our channel. And yeah, Roosevelt has put the link to our PayPal. If you could help us, if you're feeling generous, you just click that link and it goes to our PayPal. Anything helps, guys, and it keeps us alive. It keeps us keep going, bringing you more content, more streams, more original content, all that stuff. So make sure you guys hook us up. But until next time, guys, peace.